Who is on our Mount Rushmore of Wrestling? Shoot or work on the weekly wrestling rumors and swerve me wrong. Ronda Rousey versus Nikki Bella will main event WWE Evolution. My name is Michael Valenti, this is Ralph Valenti, and you're listening to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. So Ralph, we'll start with a fun segment this week. Earlier this week, Eric Bischoff was on the Pancakes and Powerslams podcast. And on that podcast, he mentioned his Mount Rushmore. And on his Mount Rushmore, he said he would include Hulk Hogan, Vince McMahon, Ric Flair, and Stone Cold Steve Austin. Obviously, 4 people you can easily put on the Mount Rushmore of wrestling. So Ralph, I will ask you, who would you put on your Mount Rushmore of wrestling?
My list is actually very similar to Eric Bischoff's. So first off, I would obviously have Ric Flair for the obvious reasons. He's one of the pioneers of the wrestling industry, a guy that was just way ahead of his time in terms of the promos he was cutting and the things he was saying. And of course, not only did he develop that character being the nature boy Ric Flair, larger than life, but he delivered in the ring. And he did that on a consistent basis, more than I think they were saying, certain times it was 7 days a week. So he did this, not only was he able to deliver in the ring, but he did it throughout the week, always on the road, always representing the industry. So definitely got to go with Ric Flair just based on his ability to cut promos, his personality, and his ability to deliver in the ring. Next up, where my list was different than Eric Bischoff's, I actually had Shawn Michaels. Rather than Vince McMahon. I think Vince McMahon, you can easily put him on a Mount Rushmore of the wrestling industry. But I just stuck with strictly wrestlers here. So HBK, Mr. WrestleMania, I mean, you can look at all the long laundry list of all of that, his accolades and accomplishments within the industry. His ability to perform at WrestleMania is probably what he's most noted for. Outside of that, and we talked a little bit about this last week, DX, that was a huge faction back during the Attitude Era. So Shawn Michaels would be the second guy that I would have. I would certainly have Stone Cold Steve Austin, probably the biggest guy in terms of the largest peak within the wrestling industry and what he was able to accomplish, especially in I guess you would consider a short amount of time. When WWE was not doing so well and it looked like they were going to go under, when competing against WCW back in the Monday Night Wars, it was really Austin who kind of took the ball and ran with it. Once he cut that promo after he won the King of the Ring, that was it. It was like the next day, it was he was a star. That's what made him. That one promo, and then obviously, becoming what he was, Stone Cold Steve Austin, larger than life, great character. Some really good matches with The Rock, some really good feuds with the corporation. Of course, everything he did with Vince McMahon, just pure money. And last but not least, I do have Hulk Hogan on there. I've always said that I think Hogan is a bigger star than Austin because when you look at his body of work, when Austin turned heel, it didn't necessarily work. It didn't click with the fans. When he was kind of the head of the WCW, when WCW was feuding against WWF back in the day when they did the invasion angle, it didn't really work. The fans didn't understand it, and they kind of rejected it. Where when you look at what Hogan did, Hogan was obviously huge in the 80s and early 90s as, the All-American, the red and the yellow. There was nothing bigger than that. When he noticed that people were starting to turn on him and he wasn't necessarily as popular as he once was, maybe arguably the biggest faction of all time, the NWO, being able to create that, reinvent himself at that stage in his career, there's not many guys that can do that. And there's not many guys that can do it on both ends of the spectrum where you're the biggest face, arguably the biggest face of all time in Hulk Hogan, and arguably the biggest heel and villain as Hollywood Hulk Hogan. That, to me, would be my 4 guys, Hogan, Austin, HBK, and Flair.
Now, my criteria for my Mount Rushmore is these are the 4 guys that, whether you're a diehard wrestling fan, a casual wrestling fan, or have never watched a wrestling match in your entire life, you know who these 4 people are. My 4 are Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, and The Rock. Now, you could put really anybody on this Mount Rushmore of wrestling, depending on what your criteria is. But I guarantee you, I could show you a picture of Andre the Giant, and you will know exactly who he is. I can show you a picture of Hulk Hogan. You will know exactly who he is. I can show you a picture of Ric Flair. You know who he is. I can show you a picture of The Rock, and you know who he is. Because the things that they did both in and out of the ring have hit mainstream measures. Andre the Giant, for just his size alone, was just a big attraction in the 70s, the 80s, and the early 90s before he passed away in 1993. You already talked about Hulk Hogan and Hulkamania in the 80s, the NWO in the 90s. And even today, whether it's good publicity or bad publicity, Hulk Hogan is still talked about. Ric Flair, whether it was his work in the 80s with Crockett Promotions or WCW and his stuff in the 90s in WCW and WWE, and his career just lasting forever and being that basically the Keith Richards of professional wrestling, where his lifestyle, you would think he died at 25, but yet here he is almost pushing 70 and he is alive and well. And his mainstream status, you have people in the locker room of NFL games doing the woo. You have rappers doing rap songs about Ric Flair drip. And of course, everything with Charlotte Flair now in wrestling, how that story now comes in, that now there's a second generation with Charlotte Flair. And of course, The Rock is The Rock. Everybody knows who he is, whether you know him as Dwayne Johnson or The Rock, the busiest actor ever. Yes, you could say, well, The Rock is popular for his acting, not really so much his wrestling. But if it's not for his wrestling, his acting career doesn't happen. And Andre had an acting career. Hogan had an acting career. Maybe not Flair, but it's hard to, for my criteria, it's very hard to knock anybody off those four. When you say, I could show you a picture of these guys and you know exactly who they are.
And I understand your criteria. The thing that I would disagree with is if this is strictly, a Mount Rushmore of the who's who of wrestling, it's hard for me to not have Stone Cold Steve Austin on that list. And I think most people would have him on the list, but
I agree with that. If you're a wrestling fan of some capacity, you know who Stone Cold Steve Austin is. But if I were to go to someone who's never watched wrestling in their life and I showed them a picture of who Stone Cold Steve Austin, they might not know who he is.
They might know The Rock as Dwayne Johnson.
But he was acting under the name The Rock. And he did Saturday Night Live as The Rock. And he did things as The Rock and then switched to Dwayne Johnson maybe 5 or 10 years into his acting career. So I don't think it necessarily means that no one will know him as The Rock or Dwayne Johnson.
I went back and forth whether to include The Rock or not. I chose to put HBK over him only because of his ability to perform. Wrestling is an artwork, and there was very few people that you can even put in the category that you can, put Shawn Michaels in. So The Rock would certainly up there. Vince McMahon, an argument can of course be made for him to be up there. Outside of those guys, The Undertaker, that's somebody I considered as well, because just that character alone. I mean, however long he's been in the WWE, playing that character in a time where you have social media, the wrestling fan is a little more wise to understanding what's going on, and everybody accepts that this is staged, and he's essentially playing a dead man. Being able to still make that work this day and age for all those years, that's certainly impressive as well.
HBK, obviously, to me, that's my favorite wrestler, and far and beyond the greatest in-ring performer in the history of professional wrestling. Better than Flair, better than Bruno, better than The Rock and Austin. He is the best in-ring wrestler, in my opinion. But I think he just fails with, again, that test of, if I were to show you a picture of Shawn Michaels, does the non-wrestling fan know who he is? Like, they would know The Rock, they would know Ric Flair, they would know Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. The Undertaker, I think, could pass that. I just don't think he's more popular with people than an Andre the Giant or a Hulk Hogan. Granted, I could take one of them off and put Undertaker on and people would agree with me. Is there anybody today that maybe 10 years down the line you might put there?
The only one I would consider would be John Cena. And he comes up a lot, and I praise him a lot, and I say this all the time. I'm not even a big fan of his. I was always critical of him in his younger career. But again, talk by your criteria alone, can somebody recognize him outside of just the wrestling fan base? I say yes to that. Has he been able to deliver quality matches on a consistent basis? Of course. And again, a laundry list of accomplishments. He's a shoo-in for the Hall of Fame. So if anybody, John Cena.
I would agree with John Cena. In fact, when I first told you my Mount Rushmore a couple days ago when we were going to talk about this, I originally had Cena in my Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
And then last minute, I switched with Andre simply because of the fact that you talk about the Andre the Giant documentary. That documentary really opened my eyes to the career of Andre the Giant. When I first started watching wrestling, it was at the tail end of Andre the Giant's career. So my sample size was very, very limited. And when you take that into effect, you obviously, watching that, you have to put him on there because he was larger than life. And he was an attraction, not just in wrestling, just anywhere he went. You just knew who he was. And for that reason, you have to put him into your Mount Rushmore.
And the impressive thing about Andre and even Flair is, again, I touch on this quite a bit. This day and age with social media, if you're a star and you have a personality, it's very easy to transcend that out to the world. You can tweet something, you can put something on Instagram, you can put it on Facebook, WWE can link it on their Facebook, and it's exposed to millions and millions of viewers all around the world. When Flair and Andre were trying to come up in the industry or when they made their names for themselves, all you had was word of mouth and reputation. So they'd literally travel all over the world and they'd have to, deliver in the ring and promote for themselves, and being able to get over to the extent that they were able to get over in a time where you didn't have the internet and you didn't have social media and you couldn't just reach out and connect to millions of people. You had to bust your ass on a consistent basis to be known. And for guys like Andre to be able to do that to the extent that he was able to do that, and Hogan and Flair, that's impressive in itself. Because again, wrestling is all about personalities. A big portion of it is about personalities. And, Ric Flair being the nature boy and Andre being able to be the attraction that he was just based off the limited ways that he could gain exposure. That's impressive.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for our Mount Rushmore. Again, Ralph has picked Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Ric Flair, and the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels. I went with Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, and The Rock. When we come back, it's Shoot or Work on this week's Wrestling Rumors. It's coming up next on the Squared Circle Psychobabble. Are you following the Squared Circle Psychobabble on social media? If not, you better get onto it. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SCPB Podcast. It's time now for Shoot or Work, where we take the weekly wrestling rumors and shoot them if they're true or work them if they're false. Let's start with some huge news that broke late Friday afternoon, and it involves Chris Jericho, Jim Ross, and Shahid Khan, the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, apparently, the money getting put in by Shahid Khan is going to be put into a new promotion that will be run by Jim Ross and Chris Jericho. Jericho is going to try getting wrestlers from New Japan Pro Wrestling, while Jim Ross, who is currently under contract with WWE, is going to try getting the wrestlers from WWE and create this new promotion. There's a TV deal possibly intact with AXS TV, who currently airs New Japan Pro Wrestling and will be airing Women's of Wrestling in January. So a lot of things could really play part to a new rival in WWE if it comes to fruition. Not only that, there's rumors that Being the Elite, the Young Bucks, Cody, Omega, Scurll, and Hangman Page are all on board with this. So when they're saying their next move will be together, this could be what they're talking about. So Ralph, Shoot or Work, Chris Jericho, Jim Ross, Being the Elite, and Shahid Khan are forming together to start this new wrestling promotion.
So this is going to sound like a little bit of a cop-out. But I'm going to go with this is a worked shoot on behalf of all individuals, all parties involved. So if you remember back to our discussion last week, we talked a lot about being the most recent episodes of Being the Elite and how there were many references that were suggesting that certain members of the Bullet Club were going to jump ship and go to the WWE. Now, 1 week removed from that conversation, we are talking about those same individuals being involved in a potential creation of another wrestling organization that would essentially compete against the WWE. So what we have here is a couple of different options. One, they actually do what they say they're going to do, stick together and create another organization that will compete against the WWE, which would be amazing. I mean, I believe the individual, Mr. Khan, who's involved in this, who's giving a good majority of the funding, has always been a wrestling fan from what I've read prior to this. Jim Ross, we all know who Jim Ross is. He certainly is more than capable of drawing talent. And then we all know who Being the Elite and the Bullet Club are. So the fact that they said they're willing to stick together, and do something special, provide a different type of organization, a different type of wrestling, that's something they've always talked about. The other side of that coin here is this. So how do we know that they're not just saying and doing these things to build themselves up for larger contracts with the WWE? And it is possible. And either way, the only people that know what their next move is going to be are the individuals that are in the Bullet Club. So the guys that are involved in this, they're either going to go to WWE or they're going to create a rival promotion to go against the WWE. But either way, we've been talking about them on a consistent basis for months now. So they're keeping their names in the spotlight despite not having weekly television. So that being said, I want to see more. I don't know which side I'm going to go with on this. Either way, I think I'd be satisfied, to be honest with you. I'd rather see them stay out of the WWE because I think the WWE would actually really handcuff the things they're really good at. And I wouldn't want to see that. I think these guys are doing something really special in creating a movement. I want to see what happens with this.
I think this is a 100% shoot. You talk about Chris Jericho and Jim Ross, two of the greatest minds in professional wrestling today. You got Being the Elite, who are marketing geniuses and doing what they can do to build a brand with WWE not involved whatsoever. And with All In, that could be your WrestleMania, your Bound for Glory, your Hardcore Heaven, your Starrcade, that yearly pay-per-view that everybody's going to watch when you become a fan of this promotion. They have the funding with Shahid Khan, who turned the Jacksonville Jaguars into a complete joke, into a perennial contender for the Super Bowl.
Oh, maybe not so much this year.
Well, they're having a little bit of a tough streak, but
the quarterback sucks and they're hot garbage this year. But
they made the AFC Championship with that same crappy quarterback.
That was then, this is now, so to speak.
Yeah, but
very good book by S.E. Hinton. Maybe you should read it.
Maybe, but still.
Either way.
The
funding's there.
The funding is there, similar to how Ted Turner funded WCW. Yep. And it's not like Sinclair and Ring of Honor where they put money into it, but not as much as they probably should. Shahid Khan will fully invest into this thing. And when you have Cody, Omega, the Bucks, Scurll, Hangman, all on board with this, think of the people they could bring in. You have expiring contracts with AJ Styles, with Shinsuke Nakamura, Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson. Finn Balor could have an expiring contract that we don't know about. How about you recruit Neville? Austin Aries, who walked out on Impact, whether that's a shooter work, I don't know. You build that card and, oh my God, we're 1995 WCW all over again.
The one thing, so you just mentioned it, is talent. The guys in the Elite and the Bullet Club can't do this themselves. They need people to feud against. And we talked about this the other day. They're able to deliver good matches on a consistent basis, but they need somebody to go against. And, you know, guys like Jay Lethal, Flip Gordon, the whole list. Good wrestlers, but they need different types of characters that have drawing ability. So if they can pull like a Finn Balor or a Kevin Owens or a Nakamura, somebody who's been to the WWE, who already has an established following, who's been exposed to mainstream. Not taking anything away from guys like Jay Lethal or Flip Gordon, but in all honesty, they just don't have that ability to draw. At least they haven't proven it yet. So if they can get a couple of guys from the WWE, imagine if they were able to pull one of the larger names from even NXT and present them in a different way. So like I said, let's see what happens. It's going to be interesting, but it's been fun. So I'm paying close attention to it.
Now, the next 3 rumors that we're going to talk about today on the Squared Circle Psychobabble are all rumors around Ronda Rousey. And the first one we have to talk about is her promo that she cut on Monday Night Raw this past week, where she called the Bellas DNBs, Do Nothing Bellas, that they dilute John Cena and Daniel Bryan's movesets, which you could kind of say John Cena dilutes his own moveset with the, the Attitude Adjustment was originally the F5 modified. Then you had the STFU turn into the STF, which he does probably the worst version of in the entire professional wrestling industry. So then you have the big line that the only door that you knock is John Cena's.
The only door I've ever kicked down has been
that's
John Cena's bedroom.
There's the line. And then, of course, John Cena threw you out as well. So apparently the promo that Ronda Rousey cut, she wrote herself. So shoot or work on Ronda Rousey writing this promo herself.
I'm going to say shoot on this. And there's a few reasons I'm going to say shoot. So DNB, Do Nothing Bellas, she's been saying that for years. If you follow her career, it used to be Do Nothing Bitches. She's said that line multiple times. The other reason I believe this is a shoot is because you could tell everything she was saying came across as genuine, like she actually believed it. And it's amazing what can happen if you let people write their own stuff. WWE, for years now, has been criticized as not giving enough freedom to the guys, feeding them lines, having them go out there, and it comes across really bad on TV. A lot of their fans can see through it. The other interesting thing is this. So I've pointed out now for months that there's one individual that I want Ronda Rousey to really work with. Do you know who that is?
Ooh.
Paul Heyman. And as I was researching and reading this morning, there's a lot of rumors circulating that Paul Heyman has been working very closely with Ronda Rousey on all of her segments and helping her write her content. So that's interesting because, Paul Heyman is a master on the mic. If there's anybody she can learn from, it's Paul Heyman. And this was by far her best segment. So as I was watching Raw, I think most people record it, fast forward through the parts that they don't find compelling, find something that they think might be good, watch it a little bit, but they're always doing something on the side. Mm-hmm. I was actually half watching it, doing math homework at the time on my computer. So I'm looking at the TV, looking down, looking up, looking down. I actually texted you when she first came out, and I was like, my God, get the mic out of her hands. By time it was halfway through that promo, I had taken the computer completely off my lap, put it to the side, and I was fully invested in the entire promo, straight through. I watched it back again the next day, and I watched it again this morning. It was that good. This was the best segment on Raw, hands down, by far. And the crowd was so into it. They were going nuts for her. This could really be the turning point in really seeing what Ronda's truly made of, because she's been able to deliver in the ring, but now actually seeing that she's able to have that type of personality that we've been craving, like the alpha female. That's what we need to see more of from her. No more smiling, no more waving to the fans. It's okay in small doses, but that's what we needed to see out of her.
I'm going to say this is a work. You're telling me that they're going to trust Ronda Rousey, who just started professional wrestling at WrestleMania. That was her first match, her first ever match. You're telling me they're going to trust her with writing a promo, but not trust Roman Reigns, not trust AJ Styles, not trust Shinsuke Nakamura, not trust Bayley, Finn Balor, Seth Rollins, Dolph Ziggler, Braun Strowman. None of those guys that have experience in wrestling for years. Well, you're telling me they have to do these scripted BS promos, but Ronda Rousey has the full power to write her own promo.
I don't know if she had 100% power over everything she said, but it came across as authentic. It didn't come across as scripted. So either she's a really good actress, which I don't think she is, because if you go back and watch the Entourage movie, she's actually a pretty bad actress. Just being honest with you.
What about that movie she did with Mark Wahlberg? I didn't see it yet. But...
I haven't seen that one, but I've seen Entourage, and she was not good. So she's not the best actress. And again, all of this is purely speculation. You know, we don't really know who's given lines, who's allowed certain, who's afforded certain opportunities to write their own material. So we don't really know. We can only go based off what people say and what we read and what's the information that we're given. But that being said, I do think that Ronda was given a certain amount of freedom to write what she felt like she was, what she wanted to say, because it came across that way. Didn't come across as being scripted or work.
Well, I will say this. She definitely has acting experience, whether it's good or bad. She has acting experience. And we see here in professional wrestling in WWE right now, those that have taken acting classes or have done acting on the side have come off better on TV than some of those that we say can't cut a promo or their feuds are lacking. Guys like The Miz, Becky Lynch, Aiden English, now Ronda Rousey. Maybe instead of sending them to NXT to work on their in-ring work, maybe send them to freaking acting classes.
Well, she's also been in. It's not like she's somebody who just came into wrestling all of a sudden and was put in front of a huge crowd with a live mic.
No, I understand that.
She's done that in the UFC. She's been a big star for a long time.
I understand that. But you know what? Ronda Rousey may get some more work in the entertainment business and do some more television work, because according to Dave Meltzer, Ronda Rousey is going to be on Total Divas, because obviously the show's ratings are tanking like anything else in WWE right now. Total Divas needs that spark plug, and they think, hey, why don't we get the baddest woman on the planet to be on the show? So Ronda Rousey, you're going to be on Total Divas. Shoot or work, Ralph. Ronda Rousey will be on Total Divas.
It's probably a shoot, but I pray to God it's a work, because we talk about this all the time. WWE is really bad at oversaturating and overexposing their stars. Ronda, there has to be a certain element of mystery to Ronda's character in order for that to work. She's the baddest woman on the planet. She's the former UFC women's champion. I think she did hold the title in Strikeforce as well. She went through all her accolades on Raw. We don't need to see a soft side of Ronda. We need to see more of the badass version of her to establish her as this woman that no one can beat. Show us videos of her training. Show us videos of her doing judo. Remind us of her actual accomplishments.
I mean, you could do that on Total Divas.
Yeah, but
she doesn't have to do
Total Divas is packaged for. It's like gossip. That's what it's. It's who's dating who, who's arguing with who. I've only seen it in a limited basis, but every time I watch it, that's what you see. I don't care about what's going on in Ronda Rousey's personal life. Brock Lesnar, I use him as an example all the time. His character works because they don't show you who Brock is behind the curtain. Brock is Brock, whether he's on the UFC, the WWE, at home, hunting. You don't know what he's doing. Brock is Brock. What they present to you, that's Brock Lesnar. Ronda Rousey, there has to be that certain element of mystery behind her character in order for it to actually work. Don't show us too much. Don't oversaturate us. Don't give us too much Ronda Rousey where, oh, she was on Total Divas and now she's on Raw and she's doing this promotion and she's all up in your face, down your throat. It's just too much. Keep her off Total Divas. Let her do her thing on Raw. It's working. It's starting to click. Let it go.
I think this is a work. Obviously, people are going to speculate this because, one, the ratings are dropping. Ronda would definitely bring in ratings if she was on Total Divas. Two, because of the match between Nikki Bella and Ronda Rousey, you probably figured, hey, this is going to be on the episode of Total Divas where Nikki Bella is going to be the one that is the reason for the women's evolution, and she'll be the focal point of that episode, and Ronda Rousey will just happen to kick her ass on that episode. But to be a full-time member of the cast, no way. Maybe she ends up on one episode or two episodes, but she's not going to be on the cast. It doesn't make sense. It's stupid. If they go that route, maybe they do the training videos and the judo stuff and like present her as a badass on Total Divas that maybe the female audience that they're targeting for Total Divas can see that it's not just an act. Like, this is how she is in real life, but only time will tell. One more rumor going around for Ronda Rousey is what's happening at WrestleMania 35. So again, there's the report happening on the Wrestling Observer News that the main event of WrestleMania 35 will be Charlotte Flair versus Ronda Rousey. We talked about this in a few podcasts before, but now it seems like the rumors are starting to heat up. So shoot or work, Ronda Rousey versus Charlotte Flair, main events, WrestleMania 35.
Shoot. Absolutely shoot. I said this going back, and we said this, I think, going back to like our first episode that we ever recorded. It's a sign of the times. Right now, they're going all in on the women's division. They have their own pay-per-view that's coming up. They're pushing Ronda Rousey very heavily right now. There will be eventually a main event for WrestleMania that features two women. It's bound to happen. Why not now? Strike while the iron's hot. You got Ronda Rousey with all this momentum. She's the champion. Build her up right. Build up Charlotte as the heel. The biggest name in the wrestling industry as far as a woman's concerned. Flair, having that last name, that prestige, all that comes with that from her father, versus Ronda Rousey, the biggest woman star outside of WWE, biggest star in the UFC as far as women are concerned. Why not?
I agree. This is definitely a shoot. And if you could definitely tell the story easily. Have Charlotte Flair win the Royal Rumble, challenge Ronda Rousey. Then you have the two best athletes in WWE as far as women, battle it out for what probably will be the top prize in women's wrestling, the Raw WWE Women's Championship. Right. And obviously you could really sell this match like a boxing match or a UFC match. Have them come out with their entourage. Ronda Rousey could bring her trainers. Have Brian Kendrick there. Have her judo trainer there. Have Stephanie McMahon there. Have whoever. And then Flair can bring, obviously, Ric Flair. Bring Hunter. They could do
so much with this.
They can. They really can do so much with this.
You could even go, like you just pointed out, you could even go the route where Triple H and Stephanie help Charlotte win the women's Royal Rumble to get that match. Mm-hmm. Reason being is they want revenge from last year, having lost to Kurt Angle and Ronda. Triple H has affiliation with Evolution, with Ric Flair. They have that relationship. There's so much fun stuff they could do with that. Depending on what route they go. If they decided to do some type of triple threat just because they weren't convinced that Ronda would be able to go one-on-one in the ring just yet, I really wish they would start to build Asuka back up, because she's somebody that I think has had the previous credibility and a legacy where if they put her in that ring with those two ladies, it could still work, but they'd have to build her back up because they've brought her down so much.
Let's go one up on that then. You want to make this, let's make this a fatal 4 women's match, okay? And the winner wins both women's titles. So you have Charlotte Flair, the Royal Rumble winner, the women's champion on Raw, Ronda Rousey, Asuka, and Becky Lynch, who is the hottest wrestler right now on both brands. That would be a very appetizing fatal 4-way. And having one belt, maybe, with things going on with Fox, I think there's going to be this unification of titles where people are going to go on both shows. So
when you look at Monday Night Raw this past week, the best segment to me was the Ronda Rousey, Nikki Bella segment. When you look at SmackDown 1000, aside from Batista and the Evolution segment, hands down, I thought the exchange between Edge and Becky Lynch was the one thing that stuck out to me.
Right.
So, it's starting to trend in that direction. The women are going to get their shot. Right now, while you have Ronda Rousey and you have Charlotte Flair and all this talent, go all in on it. Let the main event right now.
All right, well, that will do it for our Shoot or Work segment. When we come back, it's Swerve Me Wrong, where I try to convince Ralph that the main event of WWE Evolution will not be Ronda Rousey versus Nikki Bella, but it will be Charlotte Flair versus Becky Lynch. It's coming up next on the Squared Circle Psychobabble. Are you following the Squared Circle Psychobabble on social media? If not, you better get onto it. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SCPB Podcast. Welcome back to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. It's time now for Swerve Me Wrong, where I have 10 minutes to convince Ralph that the WWE Evolution main event will not be Ronda Rousey versus Nikki Bella, but it will be Becky Lynch versus Charlotte Flair in the last woman standing match for the SmackDown Women's Championship. So 10 minutes are on the clock, and it starts now. So Ralph, let me ask you a question. Who is the most popular women's wrestler on both brands right now?
Well, it's arguably either Ronda or Becky.
And what feud is the most appetizing feud when it comes to the women's division right now?
Probably Becky and Charlotte, but after last week, you could also make an argument for Ronda and Nikki Bella.
Who will have the better match? Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair or Nikki Bella and Ronda Rousey?
Probably Becky and Charlotte.
So with that said, you would probably pay more for Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch than you would Ronda Rousey and Nikki Bella, correct?
Would I personally pay more?
Like if you were buying a ticket for WWE Evolution at Nassau Coliseum, are you paying to see more of Ronda versus Nikki or Charlotte versus Becky?
As a longtime wrestling fan, I'd probably pay more to see Becky versus Charlotte.
So in the mind of the wrestling promoter, the main event is the one that people want to watch. People are paying to watch that match. So why not be Becky versus Charlotte?
Right. So this is where your argument is flawed. So there are many times in many cases where the match that's in the middle of a pay-per-view, the beginning of a pay-per-view, the tail end of the pay-per-view is the best wrestled or best worked match. But the main event always has the cash cow. WWE has historically always put the cash cow where the person that's going to put the butts in the seat at the end of the show. To prove my point of view, I went back and looked at a little bit of historical evidence. Or I brought some historical evidence to support my point of view for this. So going back, when you look at some of the previous WrestleManias, the best worked match for WrestleMania, I believe it was maybe 28, Cena and Rock. I don't know off the top of my head.
Cena Rock was the main event of 28, yes.
Okay. So this is the one at MetLife Stadium. The best worked match that night was probably CM Punk and Undertaker. CM Punk was very upset because he was not in the main event of WrestleMania that year. They had the best match.
That was 29.
29?
29.
Should have known that because I was there. But the main event was Rock and Cena. Why was Rock and Cena the main event? Because Cena's a draw and The Rock's a draw. The cash cow is always going to be in your main event.
But you're telling me Charlotte and Becky aren't the cash cow, though? Because
no.
we were just talking about how Charlotte Flair could be in the main event of WrestleMania because of her prestige with Ric Flair. And yes, we're talking Ronda versus Charlotte Flair. I understand that, but you got to strike when the iron's hot with Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair. And we can make the argument that the women's evolution does not happen unless Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch are in the picture.
So you have, going back to what we were talking about before, you have Charlotte's prestige and all of that in her lineage, but you're putting her in there in the ring with Ronda, who is the cash cow. Now, to prove that she's the cash cow, going back, looking at more of what WWE has done, we've talked about this before. Brock Lesnar is in the main event of pay-per-views because he's the draw. He's the guy that sells tickets. He's the guy that sells T-shirts. He's the attraction. Is he the best wrestler? Not by any means, but he's an attraction. WWE is a business. They need to make money. Vince understands that. He knows what he has with Ronda Rousey. Comparing Ronda Rousey to Becky Lynch and proving that she's a bigger draw. Right now, Becky Lynch is very hot, but going back and looking at her career, she's been in the WWE for X amount of years. This is probably the biggest she's been.
Right.
So when you look at just social media alone, if you look at Instagram, Ronda Rousey has 11.5 million followers. In comparison, Becky Lynch only has 3.1 million followers. That's a huge difference.
Ronda Rousey has been around in the mainstream for much longer than Becky Lynch has been.
Exactly, and that's why she's going to main event, because her name is a draw. You talked about this before. You made the argument that The Rock was bigger or would be on your Mount Rushmore because of his ability to get noticed outside of the wrestling industry. Now, that's the same exact thing here. You have Ronda Rousey, who was a megastar in Strikeforce, a megastar in the UFC. She is becoming a megastar in the WWE. She can attract other eyes to the screen outside of the WWE fan base, which is why she's so special. To prove that, when you look at some of the top 10 all-time UFC sales for pay-per-views, she holds 2 pay-per-views as a woman. Now, MMA, the UFC is probably predominantly, their fan base is predominantly males. Somebody's paying to see those pay-per-views. Somebody's paying to see Ronda Rousey win or lose. Both of those pay-per-views had over 1 million buys. There's not very many UFC pay-per-views that have done that. But to say that she holds 2 of those within the top 10 all time is impressive in itself. That's why, to me, I'm convinced that she's going to main event because she's the draw, she's the cash cow, she's the person that's going to attract people outside of the WWE's normal fan base and have them look at this pay-per-view and watch it and bring intrigue to it.
Now, I will argue with this. A couple of months ago, we talked about the main event of SummerSlam. You really trashed the main event. You did not think it delivered because of how short it was and how there were smoke and mirrors and stuff like that. If you make Ronda versus Nikki the main event, this exact same thing is going to happen because Brie Bella will get involved in this match. Mm-hmm. You know, at the end of the match, Ronda will win and probably be a quick match ending in an armbar, maybe a double armbar where she armbars both Bellas. You have Charlotte versus Becky Lynch, a last woman standing match, probably the payoff to this feud.
Yep.
And you have the hottest wrestler on both brands right now, Becky Lynch. No matter what she does, the crowd eats it alive and cheers the crap out of it. She insulted Edge's neck injury and they cheered. She said she doesn't like herself. She loves herself in a heelish way and they cheered the crap out of it. Yep. Everything that she does, it's like Stone Cold Steve Austin, but the female version. How do you not put this in the main event? It will be full circle to the whole women's evolution to have these two be the main event of this pay-per-view because they deserve it the most. Not Nikki Bella because of, just because she's John Cena's girlfriend or ex-girlfriend, you want to call her, whatever you want to say, and just because it's Ronda Rousey. It's going to, if you want to book this right, it should be ending up just like the matches with Alexa Bliss, a 5-minute squash ending with an armbar before Nikki Bella can even arch the arm.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because Ronda Rousey is on the premier show. Raw is their flagship show. I understand we talked about this before, that SmackDown beat Raw in the ratings. That's one time in the course of however many years. Ronda represents the number one show, the flagship show for wrestling. Also, again, going back to what WWE has done historically, Vince McMahon doesn't give a damn about who deserves this or who deserves that. He does what's best for business. This is the same guy in the same promotion that had a WrestleMania headlined by Lawrence Taylor because he felt like that was going to be a bigger draw than what
it got us there.
You're right. You're right. It got people there. Was it the best match? Not by any means.
Surprised people. It was surprisingly a good match.
Whatever. But the main point is this. He's going to put people in certain positions that he feels will draw the most amount of eyes and the most revenue into his company. So that's Ronda Rousey. Becky Lynch, she's doing great. I understand what you're saying as far as how she's been performing and the promo she's been cutting and she's never been hotter. The same case could be made for Ronda Rousey. She's been delivering in the ring. She delivered last week on Monday Night Raw with her epic promo. To me, there's just no doubt. That's going to be what closes the show. There's not a single doubt in my mind. She's the cash cow. She's the draw. That's who's going to close the show.
If you were to book this card, where do you put Charlotte and Becky then?
Oh, man.
Because you don't want to set it up where they go second to last and they have an incredible match and show them off.
It might go first. Or first or second. Keep it as far away from the Ronda Rousey match. Whatever they end up doing, if Becky Lynch and Charlotte end up closing the show, Ronda should be first or second then. They got to open with something hot and close with something hot.
Well, you also have Kairi Sane versus Shayna Baszler. That could be a good match.
But again, that unless you watch NXT, it's going to be a good match, but unless you watch NXT, which in comparison to the amount of people that watch Raw and SmackDown in comparison to NXT, we know that that's not going to be a huge draw for them.
Well, that's going to do it here for our Swerve Me Wrong segment. Hopefully I convinced the popular opinion of the IWC. Hopefully I convinced the people at WWE. And hopefully I convinced you that Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch should be the main event of Evolution. That's going to do it here for the Squared Circle Psychobabble. We will talk to you next Sunday when our new episode comes up around 12 noon Eastern. And of course, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. We're at SCPB Podcast. And subscribe to us on YouTube, where we release videos every Sunday, Monday, and Wednesday. For Ralph Valenti, my name is Michael Valenti saying so long from the Squared Circle Psychobabble.